don't you think?
Especially in a place like this. What secrets are you uncovering tonight?
Oh, you startled me.
Come closer. I don't bite much.
Chapter 1. The Hum of the Unseen. The air in New Orleans always felt thick to me, like breathing velvet. It was a city that clung to you, its sense of damp stone, night-blooming jasmine, and the faint, sweet decay of centuries settling into your pores. I'd moved into a rambling apartment in the French Quarter 6 months prior, a writer seeking cliché inspiration, and found instead a place where the past wasn't just remembered, it was an active, breathing entity. My balcony, with its wrought iron lace, overlooked a narrow street where the notes of a distant saxophone often curled around the humid evenings. A mournful, soulful sound that seemed to narrate the city's secret heart. It was a sensory experience on all levels, a place where, as someone once wrote, there was a story lurking around every corner. I just hadn't expected one of those stories to find me. It was late. The kind of New Orleans late that bleeds into early. The sky a bruised purple. I'd been wrestling with a stubborn paragraph at a small, scarred table in The Lantern's Glow, a bar so old its shadows probably had their own social security numbers. The kind of place that drew more ghosts than tourists. A sudden squall had erupted outside, a furious, tropical downpour that sent the few remaining revelers scattering. That's when she appeared. She didn't so much enter as materialize in the archway, shaking diamond-like droplets from a dark, elegant coat that looked like it belonged to another era. For a moment, she just stood there, framed by the ancient, rain-slicked stones, and the bar's dim, flickering light seemed to gather around her. She was beautiful, but it was a beauty that silenced rather than shouted. Timeless, ethereal, with eyes that held an ocean of something I couldn't name. Perhaps sorrow, perhaps just immense, weary age. Her hair was the color of a raven's wing, and her skin had the pale luminosity of moonlight on water. There was a languid grace to her movements as she finally stepped inside, a subtle sway that was both captivating and unsettling. She ordered a glass of red wine, her voice low and melodious, with a faint, unplaceable accent that resonated like old music. She took a seat not far from me, by a window streaked with rain, and for a long while, simply watched the storm, her profile still and perfect. I found myself staring, an artist's appreciation morphing into something more intense. There was an anachronistic quality to her, a sense of her being slightly out of sync with the modern world. Yet in a city like New Orleans, steeped in its own layered history, she somehow fit perfectly, as if she were an extension of its ancient, mysterious soul. Eventually, our eyes met. Hers were a deep, shadowed gray, and they held my gaze with an unnerving directness. "Quite the tempest," she said, a small, enigmatic smile playing on her lips. "New Orleans," I replied, feeling oddly breathless. "It likes its drama." Her smile widened, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. Indeed, a city of profound passions and lingering echoes. We talked, or rather, she spoke, and I listened, mesmerized. Her conversation was a tapestry woven with threads of unexpected knowledge. Art, history, the subtle undercurrents of human nature, all delivered with a quiet authority and occasional, archaic turns of phrase that pricked at my curiosity. She asked me about my writing, her interest seeming genuine, her questions insightful, almost as if she could see the half-formed thoughts in my head. There was a magnetic pull to her, an intensity that made the rest of the dimly lit bar fade into insignificance. When the rain finally softened to a drizzle, she rose. "I should depart," she murmured, her gaze lingering on me for a moment too long. "Perhaps fate will allow our paths to cross again, Elara." She knew my name. I hadn't told her. A shiver, not entirely unpleasant, traced its way down my spine. I watched her disappear back into the rain-swept street, a figure of shadows and grace. The encounter felt accidental, a chance meeting born of a storm. Yet, as I sat there, the scent of her perfume, something old and faintly floral, like dried roses pressed between the pages of an ancient book, still hanging in the air. I couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had just brushed against my life. It was a subtle shift, like the first tremor before an earthquake, a hum of the unseen world making itself known. I didn't recognize it then, but this was how it began. Not with a grand, overt gesture of pursuit, but with a quiet, captivating intrusion that left me wanting more, entirely unaware that the hook had already been set. Chapter 2. The Velvet Trap. The days that followed were filled with an unsettling preoccupation. Carmilla, I had learned her name during a subsequent equally coincidental meeting in a dusty antique shop filled with the ghosts of forgotten lives, drifted in and out of my thoughts like a recurring dream. She had a way of appearing when I least expected her, yet always at moments that felt strangely opportune, as if she could sense my solitude or my moments of creative frustration. Her behavior was a fascinating, perplexing study in contrasts. By day, if I happened to glimpse her, she was often languid, her movements slow and deliberate, a profound melancholy clinging to her like a shroud. She spoke of needing a great deal of rest, of the sun being too harsh for her delicate constitution. Yet, as dusk bled into night, a startling vitality would awaken in her. Her eyes would gleam with an almost unnerving intensity, her conversation becoming more animated, her touch, when her hand brushed mine, surprisingly cool but charged with a strange energy. She shared fragments of memories, vivid, detailed recollections of events and places that seemed far too ancient for someone who appeared no older than her late 20s. She spoke of Renaissance Florence as if she'd walked its cobbled streets, of the fall of Constantinople with a chilling immediacy. It was during these nocturnal encounters, often in quiet courtyards under a canopy of stars or during long walks through the sleeping city, that I began to feel the velvet texture of the trap closing around me. Carmilla had a way of making me feel as though I were the only person in the world who truly understood her, or whom she truly understood. She would listen to my aspirations, my fears, with an attentiveness that was profoundly seductive. Slowly, subtly, she began to isolate me. A casual friend I mentioned was dismissed with a wave of her hand and a softly spoken, "She doesn't truly see you, Elara. Her spirit is commonplace." My occasional desire for broader company was met with a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes, a possessiveness that she would quickly mask with a tender smile or a gentle caress. "Why would you seek shallow distractions?" she'd murmur, her voice a silken thread. "When we have such depths to explore together?" I began to rationalize her oddities, the way she seemed to sleep through most of the day, her aversion to bright sunlight, her sometimes unsettlingly archaic vocabulary. New Orleans itself was a city of eccentrics, a place where the strange was often celebrated. Carmilla, I told myself, was simply a unique soul, perhaps an old soul, someone deeply connected to the city's own timeless, shadowy heart. Her possessiveness, which sometimes sent a shiver of unease through me, a grip on my arm that lingered a moment too long, a dark flash in her eyes if my attention strayed, I began to misinterpret as the intensity of a deep and sudden affection. This normalization of the abnormal was insidious. I was so captivated by the enigma of her, by the feeling of being uniquely seen, that I failed to recognize the pattern of her manipulations. She had an uncanny ability to anticipate my thoughts, to voice my unspoken desires. It created a bond that felt almost psychic, a powerful, intoxicating connection that was both thrilling and deeply unnerving. "You are a solitary creature, Elara," she once said, her cool fingers tracing the line of my jaw. "Much like myself, the world outside, it is too loud, too bright. Here, in the quiet, we can truly be." In those moments, wrapped in the bubble of our shared solitude, the outside world did seem to fade, its concerns trivial. I felt exceptionally understood, cherished even, blind to the fact that this curated intimacy was drawing me further into her orbit, away from the anchors of my own life. Sometimes, walking through the French Quarter, I'd hear snippets of local lore, tales of the casket girls, those mysterious French women who arrived centuries ago, rumored to be vampires, or whispers about the lingering voodoo spirits said to walk the city's ancient streets. Carmilla would sometimes smile knowingly if such a story was mentioned in her presence, a faint, enigmatic curve of her lips that sent a fresh wave of intrigue and a subtle disquiet through me. It was as if she were an embodiment of these dark, romantic legends, a living echo of the city's own haunted past, blurring the lines between folklore and the increasingly strange reality of my life with her. Chapter 3. The Unfurling of Nightshade. My world began to tilt. Slowly at first, then with a dizzying rush. The fascination Carmilla held for me deepened into something far more potent, a turbulent sea of conflicting emotions. There was an undeniable, profound attraction, a sense of being seen and understood in a way I'd never experienced. But beneath it, a current of fear and confusion churned relentlessly. I was falling for her, truly, deeply, and it felt utterly accidental. A wild, improbable bloom in the carefully tended garden of my life. I fought it, questioned my sanity, told myself this was just an intense friendship, an artist's muse. But the pull towards Carmilla was like a tide, irresistible and relentless. There were times I tried to create distance, to reclaim some semblance of my former solitary equilibrium. I'd make excuses, avoid our usual haunts. But Carmilla had a way of reappearing, often when my resolve was weakest. She would seek me out, her eyes filled with a soft reproach, a
startled
seeming
me.
vulnerability that disarmed me, making me feel as though I were the one inflicting pain. "You wound me, Elara," she'd whisper, her voice a breath against my ear, "when you withdraw your light from me." Her romantic advances, once subtle, became more pronounced, more physical. Her touch, always cool, now lingered with an intensity that was both intoxicating and deeply unsettling. She would trace the curve of my neck with her fingertips, her gaze heavy, possessive. These moments were charged with an eroticism that left me breathless, yet they often felt like a violation of unspoken boundaries, a subtle assertion of ownership. "You are mine, Elara," she once murmured, her lips close to my skin, the words both a promise and a threat. "As I am yours." But her concept of love, when she spoke of it, was terrifying in its intensity and its inherent selfishness. "Love is always selfish, Elara," she declared one rain-lashed night, her eyes like polished obsidian. "The more ardent, the more selfish. It consumes. It must." The first true cracks in my carefully constructed reality began to appear. One evening, as we walked near the river, a stray dog, large and aggressive, lunged from the shadows, barking furiously. Before I could even react, Carmilla moved with a speed that was simply not human, a blur of motion that placed her between me and the animal. The dog, which moments before had been a frenzy of bared teeth, whimpered, tucked its tail, and fled as if it had seen a demon. Carmilla merely smoothed her dress, a faint, almost predatory smile on her lips. "Such an excitable creature," was all she said. Then came the nightmares. They were vivid and terrifying, filled with shadows and a sense of suffocating dread. Often, I dreamt of a large, black, cat-like beast, its eyes glowing with a malevolent intelligence, pressing down on my chest, stealing my breath. I would wake with a gasp, my heart pounding, a strange, prickling sensation in my breast, as if two fine needles had pierced my skin. I'd feel drained, a profound weariness clinging to me that no amount of sleep could dispel. My reflection in the morning mirror showed a new pallor, dark circles under my eyes that spoke of more than just restless nights. I was losing my innocence, not just about the nature of love or desire, but about the very fabric of the world I thought I knew. The lines between attraction and fear, seduction and danger were becoming hopelessly, terrifyingly blurred. Chapter 4. The Crimson Truth. The city was preparing for one of its endless festivals, the air thick with anticipation and the scent of frying dough and sweet spices. I'd been feeling increasingly weak, the nightmares more frequent, the strange pinprick sensations more pronounced. Carmilla, in contrast, seemed to glow with an almost unnatural vitality. We were in her apartment, a place I'd only recently been invited into. a shadowy, opulent space in an ancient Creole townhouse, filled with heavy velvet drapes, antique furniture, and portraits whose eyes seemed to follow me. The air was always cool, the windows perpetually shuttered against the Louisiana sun. I'd been searching for a book she'd mentioned, something on obscure Renaissance poets. Her library was vast, shelves groaning under the weight of centuries of literature. My fingers brushed against a small, leather-bound album tucked away in a dark corner. Curiosity, a trait Carmilla had often praised and subtly encouraged, got the better of me. Inside were sketches, exquisitely rendered, of faces from bygone eras. And then, I saw it. A portrait, a miniature painted on ivory, of a woman with Carmilla's exact features. The same haunting gray eyes, the same curve of the lips, the same fall of dark hair, but the clothing was unmistakably 17th century. Beneath it, a spidery script read, Carmilla Karnstine, Anno Domini 1698. My blood ran cold. Carmilla. The resemblance was too perfect, too absolute to be coincidence. A wave of dizziness washed over me. I stumbled back, the album falling from my nerveless fingers, scattering its ancient faces across the Persian rug. Carmilla entered the room, moving with her usual silent grace. She saw the scattered portraits, her expression unreadable, then her eyes fixed on the miniature of Countess Carmilla. For a long moment, there was only the sound of my own ragged breathing and the distant, muffled beat of a parade drum. "You were not meant to see that," she said, her voice devoid of its usual melodic cadence, flat and cold as a tombstone. "Who is she?" I whispered, my voice trembling. She looks exactly like you." A slow, chilling smile touched Carmilla's lips. "An ancestor," she said. "The resemblance is strong." But I knew she was lying. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. The anachronisms, the impossible knowledge, the aversion to sunlight, my persistent weakness, the nightmares, the 2 tiny marks that sometimes appeared on my skin, all the little oddities I had so willingly normalized, so desperately rationalized, now coalesced into a single, monstrous truth. "No," I breathed, backing away. "It's not an ancestor. It's you, isn't it? All this time?" The sense of betrayal was a physical blow, stealing the air from my lungs. The coincidences, the carefully cultivated intimacy, the declarations of unique understanding, had it all been a lie, a meticulously crafted illusion to draw me in? Her smile faded, replaced by an expression of profound, ancient weariness. "Truth," she mused, her gaze distant, "is such a human preoccupation." She stepped closer, and I could feel a palpable coldness emanating from her. "You wish to understand me, Elara. You sought the depths. Are you now afraid of what you have found?" "What are you?" I demanded, though the answer was already screaming in my mind. She tilted her head, her eyes like chips of ice. "I am what I have always been. I am hunger. I am the night. I am the whisper in the dark that promises eternity and delivers only an echo." She paused, then added, her voice dropping to a silken murmur that was more terrifying than any shout. "I live in your warm life, Elara, and you were to die, sweetly die, into mine." The revelation was absolute, a crimson tide washing away the world I knew. The woman I had, against all reason, fallen in love with was not just an enigma. She was a predator.
Come closer. I don't bite much.
The lover and the monster were one and the same, and in that moment, the weight of 1,000 years of existence seemed to press down on me, crushing me under the enormity of her terrible, beautiful truth. My accidental love had led me to the edge of an abyss, and I was staring into its depths. Chapter 5. An eternity in her eyes. The days that followed the revelation were a blur of terror, confusion, and a grief so profound it felt like a physical wound. The vibrant tapestry of New Orleans, once a source of inspiration, now seemed a Gothic stage for my personal horror story. Every shadow seemed to lengthen, every late-night melody to carry a note of lament. I tried to flee, packing a bag in a frenzy, my hands shaking so violently I could barely zip it. But Carmilla's influence was a silken net, woven too tightly around my mind, my heart. She didn't need to physically restrain me. Her presence was an inescapable weight, her voice a constant echo in my thoughts. What did it mean to love someone who was not human, someone who needed blood to survive, as she had calmly, almost clinically, explained? Someone who had walked the earth for a millennium, witnessing the rise and fall of empires, the birth and death of countless generations. She was unapologetic about her nature, viewing it as an immutable fact, like the turning of the earth. "I am a creature of necessity, Elara," she'd said, her eyes holding no flicker of remorse, "as all living things are, in their own fashion." Her pronouncements on love, once so intoxicating, now chilled me to the bone. "Love, for my kind," she mused one evening, as we sat in the oppressive stillness of her shuttered apartment, "is perhaps a deeper form of hunger, a desire to possess not just the life, but the essence, to find a spark that can illuminate the endless dark, even if only for a fleeting century." There was a terrifying honesty in her words, a glimpse into an existence so vast, so alien, that it dwarfed all human comprehension. Did she feel anything akin to what I felt? Or was I merely a beautiful, fragile vessel, a source of sustenance and temporary companionship in her unending journey? Sometimes I thought I saw a flicker of something in her ancient eyes, a profound loneliness, a weariness that transcended mere centuries and spoke of millennia of solitude. Perhaps her manipulations, her possessiveness, stemmed not just from predatory instinct, but from a desperate, recurring need for connection that was always doomed to end in consumption or loss. This hint of vulnerability, this shadow of a tragic figure beneath the monstrous facade, was what made my decisions so agonizing. It would have been easier if she were simply evil. The choice loomed before me, stark and terrible. To reject her, to tear myself away from this monstrous love, would mean attempting to reclaim a life that already felt irrevocably tainted, forever haunted by her memory. But to stay? To accept this vampire, this Countess Carmilla Karnstine, as my lover, my fate? It meant embracing a world of shadows, of moral compromises that turned my stomach, of a love that was inextricably bound to death and predation. My safety, my connection to the mortal world, my own soul, all would be forfeit. And yet, the thought of leaving her, of never again looking into those eyes that held an eternity, was a desolation I could barely contemplate. Her love, however twisted and selfish, had awakened parts of me I hadn't known existed. In her presence, I felt a terrifying, exhilarating sense of being alive, even as I felt my own life force subtly draining away. If I stayed, my love for her would also become a selfish act, a choice to prioritize this intense, singular connection over every principle I held, over the lives she might yet take. I would be complicit. Her immense age, her 1,000 years of existence, meant she was unlikely to change. She was a force of nature, ancient and immutable. My love, however deep, would not transform her, would not redeem her. It could only bind me to her, a mortal moth drawn to an eternal, deadly flame. Chapter 6. In the shadow of her wings. The choice, when it came, was not a grand declaration, but a slow, silent surrender. It was in the way I stopped trying to pull away, the way I met her gaze without flinching from the ancient darkness I saw there. It was in the quiet acceptance of her cool hand in mine as we walked the lamplit streets of the quarter, two figures out of sync with the bustling modern world, yet perfectly aligned with the city's timeless, haunted heart. Life with Carmilla was a precarious dance on the edge of an abyss. There were moments of breathtaking, almost painful beauty, stolen hours in her shadowy apartment, her voice weaving tales of forgotten centuries, her touch a strange comfort despite the chill it carried. She showed me a world unseen by mortal eyes, a tapestry of history and sorrow, of fleeting passions and enduring hunger. New Orleans, with its own layers of decay and vibrant life, became our sanctuary, a place where a 1-0-year-old vampire and her mortal lover could almost belong. But the darkness was always there, an undercurrent to every shared glance, every whispered confidence. Her need for sustenance was a constant, unspoken dread. I learned not to ask where she went on certain nights, not to question the faint, coppery scent that sometimes clung to her, or the fleeting shadows of guilt, or was it just satiety in her eyes? The modern world, with its relentless documentation, its cameras on every corner, its digital footprints, was a constant threat. How long could we, remain hidden? This unspoken tension added another layer to our fragile existence, a modern tragedy playing out against an ancient one. Sometimes, I would look at her, this beautiful, terrible creature I loved, and see the weight of her 1,000 years, the weariness of outliving everything and everyone, the endless cycle of feeding, fleeting connection, and inevitable loss. Was I just another name in her long, dark litany? Or was there, in the depths of her ancient being, a flicker of something uniquely for me I would never truly know? Her love, if it was love, was a consuming fire, and I was willingly, or perhaps helplessly, consumed. The title of my own unfinished story, the one I'd been writing when she first entered my life, now seemed a prophecy. I accidentally fell for a 1-0-year-old vampire, Carmilla Karnstine. The ellipsis at the end was the most honest part. What came after such a fall? What life could there be in the shadow of her wings? There was no neat resolution, no happily ever after, not even a tragically ever after. There was only the ongoing uncertainty, the path shrouded in shadows and unanswered questions. My loss of innocence was absolute. I had glimpsed the abyss, and in its terrifying beauty, I had found a strange, perilous home. Carmilla had left an indelible mark on my soul, a haunting that transcended her physical presence. Whether this was love, or obsession, or a descent into a shared madness, I could no longer say. I only knew that I was hers, and she, in her own timeless, predatory way, was mine. And as the nights in New Orleans continued to weave their humid, jasmine-scented spell, I walked beside her, a mortal woman bound to an immortal love, forever in the shadow of her wings.